Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Putare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Varapacharine Visesa Sanyavari Pasakata Desatani Panchakalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhuvya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So should I begin, or is Trikaligya, did you want to say anything?
Actually, I just briefed them about our situation on the meeting we just went through.
Yes.
And it's sad, but it's a reality. We got to face it and take care of it. Yeah. But let us not dwell too much on that. Let's hear some nectar from you.
Not too much.
I think everyone is dying to hear more nectar from you. 30, 40 centimeters a day. That's really something, you know.
I wanted to talk about the virus.
Okay, if you like, maybe.
No, for all listening, Trikaligya, myself, we just attended a meeting here locally in Vrindavan. We're at the point now, I guess we have 4 or 5 confirmed cases. We have another 200 people to test in the temple. So I think we're a few months behind people there in England and some other places, but India is going to fast catch up, I think, and surpass everyone. For us, of course, I gave a class the other day. I was saying how we were talking about Prabhupada in the very beginning. So, and some of you probably have already heard this, but you know, one of the very first typewriters that Prabhupada used was a Corona. The brand of the typewriter was a Corona. So I said that before any of this happened, Prabhupada, he gave us a virus as well from his Corona typewriter. He's infected us all with Krishna by his good favor. And I was just writing one of my god brothers today and saying how fortunate we are. I put on one post today. I'll read this. I'd like to read this to us. Let's see. I was actually on this morning walk. This was on a morning walk in 1973. And Prabhupada says, instead of contemplating what will happen to this world, you have got a short duration of life, say 50, 60 years. You chant Hare Krishna, go back home, back to Godhead. Don't consider what will happen to this world. The nature will take care of it. You don't puzzle your brain with these thoughts. You utilize whatever time you have got in your possession and go back to home, back to Godhead. That's the second time he's saying it. This is one paragraph. You cannot check it because people will go on with their rascal civilization. Natural consequences will be there. You better take advantage of whatever time you have got and become fully Krishna conscious and go back home. The third time he says it. We know that in threes. Prabhupada would say, I've seen myself being with Srila Prabhupada. Three, of course, is a very important number for us. And we know Harinama, Harinama, Harinama Eva Kevalama, Lakano Nasyeva, Nasyeva, Nasyeva. So Prabhupada tells us that, of course, 3 times means much emphasis. He's putting much emphasis on it. So here in this response to someone writing Prabhupada, one of his disciples, of course, you know, in a sense, none of this is really new. This, the material world, Prabhupada tells us over and over again, it's doomed. Now civilization is always doomed. But for devotees, I can remember way back into when Prabhupada was here, we were always preparing for the next catastrophe. People were leaving, devotees were leaving California in the 1970s, waiting for the next earthquake, waiting for the next war, waiting for California to fall into the ocean. So But Prabhupada's attitude was very different. See, this is the difference between spending our time, what Prabhupada says, we're contemplating the objects of the senses. So Prabhupada gave us the business of just serving Krishna. That was everything. So I was saying, I don't know if I mentioned that last week, like I was on this morning walk, that was that was a letter. There's a morning walk 1973, Prabhupada very much says the same thing. And it was on a morning walk 1975 in Mayapur. If you've seen many videos in Mayapur, Prabhupada ringing the bell. It was one of the highlights for all devotees at the festival in Mayapur. It was a very loud bell. It was a heavy metal bell, and Prabhupada would ring it very strongly every time he walked by. But it was also on one of those morning walks that Prabhupada talked about World War III. So this was 1975. And in there, of course, Prabhupada said, soon there will be a war. Now, if you look at some of the videos or you see some of the still pictures, you'll see the situation. Prabhupada's literally walking in the rice paddies. So in the rice paddies at that time in Mayapur, other than our temple, everywhere is rice paddies. So Prabhupada would walk along the ridge. If you see how paddies are, they have the area that's filled with water, and then you have little places, squares where you can walk. So the morning walk was like that, people walking behind Prabhupada on the raised thing, walking around Prabhupada. And we always listened to Srila Prabhupada, but of course this one day on the morning walk, Prabhupada immediately made everyone, we say, their antennas go up. He said, soon there will be a war. And he said it would happen between India and Pakistan. He said World War III would come soon. And when he said that, of course, other than a normal morning walk, it became a very intense morning walk because all of Prabhupada's disciples were always very eager to hear about these disasters, what's going to happen, what we should do. And devotees started asking questions, and Prabhupada was saying, he said, preaching would be very good after the war. Just like we have now, preaching is good because people are suffering. You can't, when someone is having good time, we've seen this in Hawaii over the years, very difficult to preach when people are living in a very nice, in paradise. Even Prabhupada in Hawaii said, if there's heaven on earth, he said it's in Hawaii. So when people are living that way, preaching is not so effective. But as soon as they become struggling, just like now, everyone is struggling. So for us, that's an advantage. And Prabhupada said that when the war comes, he said, preaching will be very good. And of course, he said, everyone will be looking. And he said, the farms, he said, they'll be flocking to our farms by the millions. Prabhupada envisioned a future 50 years a little different. He tried very much to have us become agrarian, have us learn how to work off the grid, how to survive, how to make our own food, have our milk, grow crops, even make our own cloth. He spoke of all these things. So anyway, when he said that, devotees became more and more agitated as the time was going on, asking questions. And finally, he just looked at all of us. We're all in our 20s, pretty much. There was almost 50 people on this morning walk. And then he just looked up into the sky and he said, if the bomb comes, he said, we'll just look up and say, here comes Krishna. So this was Srila Prabhupada's mentality. No fear, fearless. And in this one little quote, he's telling us the same thing. We shouldn't be concerned. Not that we're not careful, not that we don't take precautions. I'm not saying any of that. But at the same time, the devotee always knows he's under the protection of Krishna. Trikalagya, he said, if I could speak a little about Vrindavan, Prabhupada in Vrindavan, and I can, but as long as we're in Mayapur, I'll give another example. one thing that happened in Mayapur, and this was at that time as well, the Lotus building wasn't finished yet. It was livable, all the rooms were done, but plumbing wasn't finished. And those of you that know the Lotus building in Mayapur, you'll know bathrooms were on the end. The rooms didn't have bathrooms, but on both sides of the building, there were bathrooms. Prabhupada lived on the second floor. So when you went up the stairs were in the middle, so then there were 4 rooms on the left and 4 rooms on the right. So when Prabhupada came, he occupied 2 of the rooms on the left, one for his sitting room, one was his bedroom. The other 2 rooms weren't used because the entire bathroom on the end was for Srila Prabhupada. But there was no running water in it. And myself and the secretary, we stayed right on the other side in a room. Anyway, one of my services was at the time I had to keep water in the bathroom. I would bring buckets of water to use in the toilet, to use at the sink. I would have to bring water for his bath, heat the water up. So one afternoon, Prabhupada would have his lunch, then he would take a short nap. And then in Mayapur, he had darshan at that time. This was always one of the most important things I learned when I was with Srila Prabhupada. When he went to India, he was very giving of himself. It was something I never saw in the West. The West, we were all very busy, book distribution, Harinam, Sankirtan, all the services we were doing. And it was the West, the US, Europe, things weren't too austere. But here in India, 70, 71, 72, all the time, austerity was there. Illnesses were there, malaria, jaundice. So anyway, the one thing Prabhupada could give to his disciples was himself. So every day there was an open darshan. In the afternoon, Prabhupada anyone could come in the room and sit down, because this is the one nectar, and this was the one thing that kept them able to do their service despite so many difficulties in eating and sleeping, maintaining, just cleaning their cloth, keeping healthy. So these darshans were very important because in this way Prabhupada inspired everyone. So one afternoon, there were about a dozen devotees in Prabhupada's room, in his sitting room, and he's talking. And I left the room because I had to refill the buckets of water for Prabhupada's bathroom. So I left the room and I have a bucket and I go to the end of the building. I open the bathroom door. Now this bathroom had 4 toilet stalls, 4 sinks. It was big. It was communal. It wasn't for one room, it was for 4 rooms. So I opened the door of the bathroom and I have my bucket of water. And as soon as I opened the door, shot across the floor was a cobra. It was about 8-foot long cobra. And I opened the door and it just slithered and went past me. So of course I became afraid and I dropped the bucket, slammed the door and ran out of the bathroom. And of course, the only thing I can think, everything I did was go see Prabhupada. You have to tell Prabhupada. So I go towards the room and I don't want to make a scene because he's doing a darshan. But before I could get to the room, I ran into Bhavananda. Now, some of you may know Bhavananda. He was very colorful, very dramatic, and he was sannyasi, and him and Jayapataka, they together were running Mayapur. So I saw him, so immediately I told him. I thought he could take care of it. I said, Bhavananda, there's a cobra in the bathroom, in Prabhupada's bathroom. But what I was thinking would happen isn't what happened. It was the exact opposite. Bhavananda goes, oh my God. And he goes running into Prabhupada's sitting room, right? Opens the door wide. I'm right behind him. Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, there's a cobra in your bathroom. There's a cobra in the bathroom. So, of course, the whole darshan stopped. Prabhupada looking at him. Everyone's looking. And so Prabhupada gets up. Of course, everybody gets up. And Prabhupada, very nonchalantly, Prabhupada walks outside onto the veranda, and everyone follows him onto the veranda, and I'm there, and Bhavananda is there, and we're like, this is on the second floor, which for Americans, that means the third floor, ground floor, first floor, second floor. There's a cobra in his bathroom on the second floor. So the devotees are talking, and Bhavananda starts. He said, Prabhupada, he said, maybe it was someone from the Gaudiya Math, one of your godbrothers. He said, maybe they did it. Then he said, or maybe it was a communist. We know in the 70s, Communist Party in West Bengal was very big. Or maybe it was a communist, maybe it was a godbrother, because here's this cobra. So at that time, 1975, now we had our Kshatriyas in the temple, in some of the temples, because of various things that had happened over the past few years. So in Mayapur, there were two of them. They were brothers, and they were both very tall. One was, what was the name? Rasaparayana and Yadavacharya. Two brothers. They were both about 6 foot tall. Very nice devotees. So they were the Kshatriyas. So Rasaparayana, after a few minutes, and now we're all out just standing on this veranda. Nobody's opening the door of this bathroom because there's a cobra in there. So Rasaparayana comes and he has a knife in his hands, a little knife in his hands. Prabhupada's just on the veranda, he's hands in his bead bag, he's chanting it, just very peacefully. He's looking around. And now there's so many devotees there, and Prabhupada looks and he says, so many devotees for one snake? So he was not overly impressed. So Rasaparayana goes into the bathroom. And when he goes in, he sees the cobra, and the cobra slithered into a bathroom stall where one of the toilets are. And he follows it in. Now this cobra goes into the toilet stall, and it goes right to where the pipes are behind against the wall and starts slithering down the pipes. So at that point, some people started to realize that it probably slithered up the pipes to get into the bathroom for some reason. Anyway, he makes his way, gets onto the floor, and he manages to get it by the tail, and he kills this thing. So then everything kind of settled down a little bit. And some devotees said they saw another snake. So now everybody goes back into Prabhupada's room. And devotees, cobra. People got a little frightened. Prabhupada didn't seem frightened. He sits down behind his desk. All the devotees sit down. And Prabhupada just starts talking, as he was talking before. And then he says, you hear that? And the devotees are looking. Now remember, we're all just, this is 1975. We're all 20 years, 22, 23, devotee for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 6 years. Prabhupada says, you hear that sound? He says, that's the sound of the snake bird. He said, you know the snake bird? Actually, snake bird is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam.
Dakshaka.
Dakshaka. Yes. So Prabhupada said, at the end of its life, the snake grows wings. So he's telling us in this room. He said, and he said, sometimes, he said, just like this snake, he says the snakes, they have a mate. He said, so they travel like that. So he said, also the mate was there. He said, and a snake sees. If you kill a snake, he says, if the mate is there, that impression of the person who kills the snake is in their eyes. He said, and the snake bird comes, he says, and it will have a purpose to kill certain person. He says, and the mate of the snake will spend the rest of his life searching out that person. So now all the devotees are in the room and they're happy. He's getting us more and more afraid, frightened. This is one thing I see more and more as years go by. How much Srila Prabhupada, he acted like us, like our father, and even like our grandfather. Prabhupada was very funny. Everything he was doing here was just to see his disciples on edge. This was part of Prabhupada's sense of humor. So he starts telling us all these things just to put a little more excitement into our lives, saying, now the snake is going to look. Anyway, when I look back over the years, I see how Prabhupada did so many things that were actually very, very funny. He would make fun of us in this way. He would enjoy teasing us so many ways. So he continued to speak like that. Then finally, we all dispersed. But of course, everyone's talking about the snake. You know, you put dozens of devotees together, what do? We talk. So everyone's talking about the snake. So now a few hours go by. So now it's 9 o'clock. I give Prabhupada his hot milk, some mudi, some puffed rice. So then after that comes favorite part of the day, massaging Prabhupada at night. Massaging Prabhupada at nighttime meant you're in his room. It's maybe 10 o'clock at night. He's sitting up in the bed or he's lying down in the bed. No one else is in the room, just you, just his servant. No lights are on. No one ever enters Prabhupada's room when he gets evening massage. So for me, this is very intimate, wonderful time. And in India, particularly in a place like Mayapur, it's even more exciting because over Prabhupada's bed, his post bed, is a mosquito net. Because in Mayapur, mosquitoes are like this big and they're everywhere. So to give Prabhupada massage in the evening, he would sit in bed, then I would put the mosquito net down and get inside the bed with him. It wasn't kneeling on the floor, massaging his legs, massaging his feet. You would have to sit on the bed and do this. So for me, this was just the most wonderful thing. It was like camping with Prabhupada in a tent. So now we're inside in his room in Mayapur. Mayapur is the most wonderful place in those days. And I think it was one of Prabhupada's favorite places. The reason I say that is because when we get to Mayapur, he would be in that Lotus building. He would just look out the windows. I don't know what he would see. Prabhupada would spend a lot of time looking out from the veranda, just looking over the space in Mayapur. And one of those days when as soon as we got there, we came in, we went into his room, and he just handing his bead bag and he's looking out. And he says, he said, Sruti Kirti Maharaj, how do you like it here in Mayapur? At the time, of course, I was Grahasta. Few times he called me Sruti Kirti Maharaj. Again, Prabhupada had a sense of humor. But he said, how do you like it here in Mayapur? I said, Prabhupada, I like it very much. Such peaceful atmosphere, such wonderful breezes coming in through the Lotus building. But what I felt was Prabhupada liked it so much in Mayapur. He was so happy to establish his center there in Mayapur, Lord Chaitanya's birthplace. So now I'm in bed with him, sitting cross-legged on the bed, and he's over and I'm massaging his legs. And he said, he said, everyone is in anxiety about the snake. He created this anxiety. So now he's asking me, he's wanting to find out. He said, so everyone are in anxiety about the snake? I laughed. I said, yes, Prabhupada. And then I said, well, Prabhupada, I said, one thing that happened, I said, I just put down my we just had straw mat. We would lie on the floor, Mayapur on the marble floor. Elbow was your pillow. This was life back then. Your chadar, if you had one, would be your blanket at nighttime. So I laid down my straw mat, and next to me, Nitai Das was there. He put down his straw mat. So a few minutes later, Pradyumna comes into the room, and he puts his sleeping bag right in between the two of us, because Pradyumna's thinking. So I told Prabhupada, I laughed. I said, oh, I said, Pradyumna, I said, in the room, I said, he put his sleeping bag right in the middle of mine and Nitai's. And Prabhupada laughed. He said, oh, very intelligent. He said, so he will be protected, he said, from the snake. I said, yes, Prabhupada. Then Prabhupada said, anyway, he said, we're not worried. He said, are you worried? He said, about the snake. I said, no, Prabhupada, I'm not worried. He said, we're not worried. He said, Krishna once, he said, no one can protect you. He quoted, and he said, and if Krishna wants to save you, he said, no one can kill you. He said, but, he said, I have a godbrother. He said, my godbrother told me, he said, in the village here, there is one family, and one of the family members offended one of the local Brahmins. He said, and the Brahmin cursed them that your youngest child will be bitten by a snake and die from the venom. He said, my godbrother, he's told me. He said, so anyway, every night, he said, the family, he said, the baby in their little hut, baby was in the middle of the hut, and everybody slept around so that the baby was protected. He said, of course, one night everyone was sleeping. A snake went in there and bit the baby, poisoned the baby, killed the baby. He said, but anyway, we're not bothered. So even he told me that story while we're sitting there. He said, but we're not bothered by any snake, he said. I said, no, Prabhupada. I'm sorry, our electricity went out. It'll come back on in a moment. Hopefully, everything else will go on.
We can hear you fine.
Yeah, we can hear you. You can continue talking.
Yes, I'll continue. So then, one thing I did, I always felt around Srila Prabhupada, I said, like I was in a protective bubble. I was on so many planes with Srila Prabhupada, so many flights. Not one flight was there ever a difficulty. Wherever we went, everything always seemed to go all right. So I always felt that protection being with Srila Prabhupada. So that was went on in Mayapur. That was 1975. So now I think we have some minutes left. And for Trikali Gal, we'll head to Vrindavan. One of the reasons I live here in Vrindavan, of course, is I had the opportunity to be here with Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan in 1972, 73, 74, and 75. Of course, 1972 and 73, Prabhupada stayed at Radha Damodar Temple. And then as soon as his rooms here were able to be lived in, even again, before they're finished, just like Mayapur, if there was a room Prabhupada could stay in, at the temple, he would stay there. He always wanted to stay in his room at the temple, never wanted to stay outside, no matter how beautiful a place may be, some life member's house, hotels, all these things. Prabhupada loved to stay in his ISKCON centers. So as soon as that was available in Vrindavan, then of course Prabhupada stayed at Krishna Balaram Mandir. So I've been fortunate to be here for the last 5 months. All of you, all of these places, we don't know what the future will bring, but these places Prabhupada established for his followers to come. Prabhupada gave us Vrindavan everywhere. This is, of course, the compassion, the mercy of the pure devotee. As Prabhupada said, if I didn't leave Vrindavan, he said, none of you would know Vrindavan. So this, of course, is the fact. It's only because Prabhupada left Vrindavan, never left Vrindavan. But of course, as we can always say, it's a Chincha Beta Beta Tattva. To be here in Vrindavan is very wonderful. Prabhupada always wanted his disciples to come here for short visits, to become more enthusiastic to preach, to bring Vrindavan to others. And of course, now at this stage, like I said, we just had our meeting. I've been told now I'm 69 years old. My temple president told me to stay in my room. Stay in my room for the next 2 weeks. Oh, we'll see. I'll pretty much try to do that as much as I can. But just being here in Vrindavan is the most wonderful thing. Prabhupada permeates everywhere here in Vrindavan, at Krishna Balaram Mandir. He said, Prabhupada said about Krishna Balaram Mandir, even his own entourage. One day, some of his secretary was out visiting. Prabhupada said, where were you? As I say, when I was with Srila Prabhupada, it was very serious service. I never went anywhere, never left my room when I was with Prabhupada. I said, he taught me very early on what it meant to be quarantined, what it meant to be isolated in your room. I had very good practice with Srila Prabhupada. He stayed in his room all day after he went on his morning walk, greeted the deities, gave class. And he said this to me. He said, we're both just sitting in our rooms all day. And I said to him, Prabhupada, I said, you're Hari Das Thakur. I said, you can sit in one place. For me, it was difficult. But this is what the service was. So now again, Krishna consciousness, I see very much, he's trained us how to deal very nicely with the exact situation we're in now. We all have the benefit of association with each other through so many means now. When Prabhupada was here in Vrindavan, he asked for his secretary. Secretary was out. When the secretary came back, he said, where were you? He said, oh, Prabhupada, we went on a little tour visiting the different temples. At that time, Prabhupada said, I have put all of the tirthas here in Vrindavan in our courtyard in the Krishna Balaram Mandir. Prabhupada was so much into us having a very special, a special loyalty to what he had given us. And one of the ways he saw was that he wanted us very much to remain faithful to what he had given us, to even his temples in Vrindavan. He liked us to go see places, but our loyalty was to ISKCON, to our ISKCON temples. So he told his secretary, he said, everything is right here contained in this courtyard. And when another godbrother, one of our godbrothers, complained, he was going outside to hear classes. Prabhupada, the letter is there in database. Prabhupada wrote him and told him. He said, if you think the classes are not good, then you give class in our temples. He said, but I don't want you hearing from anyone outside. So I guess for these number of reasons, I feel very safe here under Srila Prabhupada's protection. We're here in a flat in MVT, Mayapur Vrindavan Trust. Also, to me, it's no different than living in the temple across the street. And just like I did when I was with Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur, massaging his legs, massaging his feet, I felt under complete protection of Srila Prabhupada. But if we want that protection of Srila Prabhupada, we have to remain faithful to his desires, his requests, what he wanted us to do. So as much as I appreciate everyone, places they go, things they do. I feel under Prabhupada's, under his umbrella, wherever that is in ISKCON, I always feel very much protected by Srila Prabhupada. So I'm very happy to take his shelter as he wanted, to remain in these places under the glance of Krishna Balaram, Radha Shama Sundar, Gaur Nitai. They've given us everything here. And in every temple, wherever it is in the world, that's our electricity here in Vrindavan. Here in Vrindavan, we're protected. Electricity, no electricity, whatever may go on, we're always under protection of Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. So we should all feel that security, no matter what situation it is. Like I say, here in Vrindavan now, it's getting more, it's getting more intense. Lockdown is getting more intense. I think the virus in India is just starting to take off. We're going to become like USA soon, it looks like. But through all of this, our business is to remain healthy, to remain Krishna conscious, and somehow or other to try to do something for Srila Prabhupada's mission. Somehow or other try to serve Srila Prabhupada's mission. It's more important than ever. It's more important for all of us to stay connected, to keep good association, so that we can continue to do our service. This is what's pleasing to Srila Prabhupada. This is always what he's wanted. So we can do this again. I have many classes coming up over the next few days, I guess 11, 12, 13. I'd be happy, Trikaligya, if you want to arrange other ones in the future, we can do that. We can open it up to any questions at this time. You can unmute your mic if you'd like to ask questions or whatever policy you would like to share. And I'd like to thank everyone for being here this afternoon. I guess it's afternoon for you. Yes, it's very nice to be here with you all.
Thank you very, very much, Sruti Kirti Prabhu. That was amazing. I felt actually with Prabhupada as you were describing the pastimes. Amazing. And you gave us a great insight into his personality, his character, divine character Prabhupada has. And I like what the president said to you, stay in your room for 2 weeks, because we can come and stay with you as well through Zoom. And hear these Nectarian pastimes that you're sharing. So it's absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
So devotees, anybody's got a question? Madhusudan Prabhu?
Yeah, Haribol, Hare Krishna. Trikaligya, nice to see you. And Sruti Kirti Prabhu, nice to see you again, and wonderful to hear from you these wonderful Nectarian pastimes. And I'm actually in the process of reading your book as well, and that's actually adding some more nectar and made me feel, this is a wonderful book. And actually you can see, the time that you spent and the pictures. But I wanted to ask you, I want to make a comment about one of your incidents in your book, which was about you tried to make some sandesh for Prabhupada. And you tried to make some sandesh for Prabhupada, the sweet. So you made some cheese, and then you made some sandesh, and then Prabhupada quite liked it. And obviously it was compared with somebody else's sandesh as well. So Prabhupada said, I've given you rasgulla, sweet balls, and so, but then there was this tendency for Prabhupada to comment on that they were making, can you hear me, Sruti Prabhu?
Concoction, yes, I hear you.
You can hear me,
I'm still here.
Yeah, it's all right if it blacks out.
Yeah, that's
you're
okay.
Still there, I know.
Better you don't see me.
Yeah, but Prabhupada then made a comment that these Americans were trying to make all these different types of sweets with milk powder and carob and this and that, and then that kind of implied that Prabhupada was not in favor of some of this speculative mentality Prabhupada said, I've already given you things that I like. And then these the rasgullas and the sweet balls and the sandesh, and these are the kind of sweets that are standard and I like them. But then this speculative carob and milk powder and this and that made me feel like that, we do have a tendency to kind of speculate. And this is what I mean, that when we want to offer something to Krishna as well, we may go into that speculative mood.
Yes.
So I like that story, and what it meant from that.
So what happened, this was like in 1973, and at that time, Prabhupada, another place, Prabhupada, when we arrived there, he'd said to me, so Sruti Kirti Maharaj, how do you like it here in New Dwarka?
Yeah.
What do you say? You always say, very wonderful here, Srila Prabhupada. And I did. He knew I liked it very much. See, that was the two things. He liked it very much.
We've done this.
Before, and I liked it so much in New Dwarka. And so what happened was they were making these sweets for Rukmini Dwarkadish. And these sweets were made with dried fruits, nuts. And they even had puffed rice in it. This puffed rice was purchased in the USA right off of Quaker Oats puffed rice it was. And so they had all this combination, sweetened. So I saw it, and of course, I didn't have to be told. As soon as I saw it, I knew Prabhupada's not going to like this. This is actually an important point, that when you're with Prabhupada, you very much, you learn what to do and what not to do. You learn what Prabhupada likes, what he doesn't like, how you don't invent things, you don't concoct. So I saw these concocted sweets. So I took some of them, and one day I put them on his lunch plate. Now, Prabhupada's lunch I prepared every day, a dozen preparations using his cooker. We have chapatis, rice, dal, 3-4 sabjis. And then we would have sandesh, was always there, or rasgulla, like that. So now on his choki, his table in front of him, I put 2 of the sandesh and 2 of these, what do we call them? I was going to say bogus, but not just bogus sweets. They were like rogue sweets on his plate. So now every day is the same. Every day. See, this is Krishna consciousness. Changing means you're not content. See, this is our mind. We're not content just to sit and chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada told us, all we have to do is sit in place and chant Hare Krishna, but you can't do that. So I've given you so many services. But he gave us the services, not that we go out and try to seek something else. We're not even content with the volume of service he gave us. Anyway, all this is in your head when you're with Prabhupada. You know what you can do, and you know what not to do. So I bring him his lunch, 1 chapati. Then I go back to my servants' quarters, make another chapati. So you go back and forth into his room, bringing a fresh chapati every couple of minutes. Fresh, hot, puffed up chapati. See, this is what it means. You don't change anything. You bring a chapati, you bring a chapati. Every time you go in, you slide the chapati onto his plate. It's puffed up with a little ghee on the top. You slide it onto his plate. He pushes it down. You offer obeisances, you run out of the room, and you keep doing that until he goes, okay. 5 times, 6 times. In between, he'll say if he wants a little this sabji, little more dal, whatever it is. You just back and forth offering obeisances, doing what he wants. So then I come in, finally, it'll be the last time. He says, what is this? He's pointing to these sweets, completely foreign on his plate. He knows what it is. He says, what are these? He knows I didn't make it. And I live for these moments. I said, oh, Prabhupada. I said, that's from the Raj Bhog offering. I said, they're Maha from the deity's plate. He said, what is this concoction? He says, why do they have to, he said, and he would say this many times, you Westerners, especially you Americans, always have to change everything. He said, I'm giving you such nice sweets. Gulab jamun, rasgulla, sandesh, burfi. He said, why are you concocting? He said, why are they doing this? He said, tell them not to concoct anything. He said, I've given you everything. He said, just do what I've shown you. Just do what I say. Yes. For me, it was like nectar to my ears, because now I get to say Prabhupada said. I was one of the persons that could say Prabhupada said, and you knew Prabhupada said it. It wasn't imagination, because I never had to make up anything, because Prabhupada said it. Don't concoct. So another time, this is 1973. You have to try to understand. There was no Mayapur temple. There's no Vrindavan. There's no Juhu temples. There's the West. There's the U.S. and there's Europe. And New Dwarka was the world headquarters. Devotees would fly from other temples to learn deity worship from Shalavati, the head pujari in New Dwarka, and pretty much the head pujari of ISKCON. Prabhupada trained her. But she's doing this. So I had to go back and tell her. So then a few weeks go by. And as I just told you, I would make Prabhupada a hot fresh chapati. It still has steam in it when I run into his room and put it down on his plate. So of course I tell this to Shalavati, the head pujari of New Dwarka. So one day she comes up to me. She's so happy. Sruti Kirti, she said, guess what I'm doing? No, what are you doing? She says, I'm bringing in fresh hot puris one at a time to the deities. Rukmini Dwarkadish, Gaur Nitai, Jagannath. She's running back and forth from the kitchen to the deity, to the altar, bringing him hot puris, because that's what I do for Prabhupada. So see, she translated that. This is the best thing I can do for Rukmini Dwarkadish. I said, oh, and I would never say anything. This was my mate. I would never criticize, never chastise, never instruct. That was my thing. So of course I go to Prabhupada. I said, Prabhupada, I said, Shalavati, Prabhupada knew Shalavati very well, trained her up. I said, Shalavati's bringing puris one at a time to the deities. I knew it was nonsense, but I couldn't say anything. So I said it to Prabhupada, his eyes get all big. He said, she can't do that. I said, yes, Prabhupada. He said, once you bring them their plates, you have to give them 20 minutes to eat. He said, you can't go back into the deity room. I said, yes. He said, tell her all this nonsense. Just do what I told you. You'll find letter after letter like, just do what I told you. Why you have to concoct? Anyway, in so many ways, I got to see it in relationship to the deities. And of course, Prabhupada said, if you do this, he said, this will destroy our society. Soon as you start to change how the deity is being worshipped, you concoct. He said, this will destroy everything. He said, I've given you. So their stories themselves are humorous, but they're very, very important, that we just don't invent things. You know, and this is a special thing we have in the West. In India, you know, like I just saw one of the devotees talk, she learned dancing from 8th generation, you know, dancer in the family. So this is how things are in India. People are content. The father does it, the son does it, the son does it. But we're not like this, us Westerners. We could very easily destroy everything. And Prabhupada knew this. But at the same time, he used us to spread Krishna consciousness all around the world. But it's important for us to know what we should do, what we shouldn't do. So these things are there. Don't change. Just study what Prabhupada gave us, and we continue. The formula is perfect, and he spread Krishna consciousness all around the world doing it. So we don't have to invent a new methods of doing things. We just have to have the purity. Hare Krishna, okay.
You had us in stitches. Normally we're crying, but today we're laughing.
Oh.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
So Prabhu, when you were with Srila Prabhupada, then Prabhupada only slept like 2.5 to 3 hours. Did you manage to get any sleep? How did you work around that?
Prabhupada was kind. Sleep was, we were sleep deprived. Most everybody in ISKCON. In those days, we were all sleep deprived. You wouldn't notice now in Vrindavan, but if you went back into the 70s in the West, sometimes the temple commanders would have squirt bottles during class. And if he saw anyone nod out, he just hit him with the squirt bottle. But Prabhupada, very rarely would he ring the bell before 5 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes he did, and it was an exception, and he would always say, I'm sorry, but you got to do this. Even if you walk through my room, Vrindavan is a case in point, Krishna Balaram, in Prabhupada's sitting room. So he would be in his sitting room midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning translating. To use the bathroom, he would have to walk through the servants' quarters. Right from Prabhupada's room, the very first right, that was the servants' quarters. Now they have all the display cases. Well, that's where I slept, right there, just 20 feet away from where Prabhupada's translating. So if he had to use the bathroom, he would have to walk through the servants' quarters. It didn't matter what time it was. I always heard him. I could always hear Prabhupada's feet, his lotus feet shuffling along the floor. And lying back asleep. And as soon as I heard him, I would roll over and just do a Dandavad out loud. And he would say, take rest, take rest. And then he would walk to the bathroom. But when he would come back, I would do the same thing. And he'd go, take rest, take rest. And then he would walk back to the room. But anyway, these were some of the pastimes that we would have. But he tried to let me make sure I had rest. All the time telling us in lectures, sleep less, eat less. But as soon as you did it, he would chastise you and tell you you should eat more. Whenever he saw me lose a little weight, he would say, are you okay? It was right at Bhaktivedanta Manor, right by where you live.
Yes.
Vyas Puja afternoon. So now imagine, we're fasting for Janmashtami. Then the next day I ate a little bit at midnight, fruit, wasn't hungry. Next day, Vyas Puja, we fasted till noon. He had a big feast in his room. That's on the video, 1973, Bhaktivedanta Manor. So then after he eats, he rings the bell. I go in the room, offer obeisances, and he just looks at me. He says, are you okay? I said, yes, Prabhupada. He said, your health is okay? I said, yes, Prabhupada. He said, you look thin. He went like this. And I said, oh. I said, well, I fasted. Yesterday I didn't eat, and I just had a little bit. Even today at lunch, I wasn't very hungry from fasting, so I didn't eat that much. He looked at me. He said, you have to give me massage every day. He said, you should eat whatever you can digest. He said, you need your strength. He put his arms up. He said, you have to be strong to give me massage. He said, you shouldn't decrease your eating. He said, you have to eat whatever you need. He said, how are you going to do your service? He said, if you don't eat. Yes, probably. So then I gave up the idea of trying to control. 2 years went by. I did the same thing. 2 years later, I was with him 2.5 years. We're in Vrindavan. He calls me in the room. I don't even remember what happened 2 years ago? And he looks at me, are you okay? He said, you look thin. I said the same thing. Oh, we fasted. He said, you have to eat to do your service. So Prabhupada could be very confusing. he preached absolute, but on the practical, he was so practical and he was so easy. And it's why after 50 years, I'm here. I'm not here because I'm a good devotee. I'm here because I understand even being bad, Prabhupada engaged me in his service. To this day, I understand Prabhupada's compassion. You just try to serve him, he'll take care of everything else. He's not gone. If you think he's gone, you don't understand this philosophy at all. You don't understand Srila Prabhupada's level of attachment to his ISKCON society. With that, I'll leave you. Just know Prabhupada's here. We're all serving him. We're all trying to do our best to serve him in his mission. And you just keep doing that. At the end of this life, those 50, 60 years, you can go back home, back to Godhead. Because you don't worry about all this other stuff. Krishna takes care of it. Krishna's arranging everything. Our business is to concentrate on service. Whatever we need to do that, that's what we should do. That should be our anxiety. That should be what we're concerned about. These other things, it's going to go on. We do the needful, Prabhupada said, do the needful, but then do your service and be happy.
Amazing advice.
And then the lights go out.
Confirmation. Thank you very, very much.
So much. Yes. And we'll certainly arrange another time also.
Very much. Well, I would recommend reading this book. It'll give you more nectar, but certainly is to try and avoid this concoctive nature of ours.
Yes.
That can bring us down. And that's one thing I think you've learned, how Prabhupada trained you, that what Krishna would also like as well. And we have a tendency to speculate a bit too much, which is why we are here.
Prabhupada,
so thank you very much for your association. Yeah.
Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness is common sense. And if you don't have any, find someone that does.
I know I've heard the expression common sense isn't that common though.
Not common anymore. No, it's not. No, it's gone.
Thank you.
Just before you leave, Shutakirti Prabhu, yes. I just wanted to ask, good. If you could just cast your eye on this wonderful personality here. Her name is Naniben. We call her Naniben. Pratibha or Puja. She has several names actually, just like Krishna. But we know her affectionately as Naniben. If you just bless her, she's doing some nice service for Go Mata. And this is the Mataji who is doing that wonderful service. So
thank you so much. Yes.
Give her your blessings and encourage her in her Krishna.
There's Go Mata's blessings. We have Hare Krishna, very nice. Mataji here in MVT in the one corner used to be a child's playground. Now it's the home of Saraswati, our one Sarabi cow. She lives there. And many of us bring her our scraps, food every day. She's really sweet. She's so funny. If you go on my on Facebook, we have a Sruti Kirti Vishaka. You'll see many videos of her. She's so affectionate. And every time we go see her, of course, she lifts up her head. Every time. You bring her, sometimes you'll bring her the scraps and she smells it. If it's nice, papaya, mango like that, she eats it. But if it's like potato peels and things, she smells it. Then she looks at it and goes, scraps, just scratch my neck. to be with the cows is just the most wonderful thing. Yeah, so it's a great opportunity. We
Yes,
know
Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances at his lotus feet. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
In the West now they have cow hugging. They charge people. They charge people to come to their farm and sit with the cows. You can sit with the cow for a half an hour for like $20 or something and hug the cow. But it's a thing. People actually understand that just by being around them is a relief. Just by hugging a cow, we get relief. Yes. Govinda.
Hare Krishna.
There you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll certainly arrange another date for you.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Srita Kirti Prabhu ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai. We have very busy week coming up, but I think we're going to be online more than anything. Temple is closed.
Yeah.
So thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We are really appreciate of you. Amazing, amazing class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all. We'll see you soon.
Hare Krishna. So we can chant one round, especially for the devotees who are not particularly feeling well in Vrindavan. But before we do that, Trikaligya Prabhu, is there anything else you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you and your wonderful team here for organizing this on a regular basis. It's a nice opportunity. It's a two-way system. It's a great opportunity for us to preach and hear from senior devotees like Sruti Prabhu. There are several other Prabhupada disciples here who I will also coordinate with so that you can have them come on and speak. And I will certainly try and get Dina Bandhu and Devi Sakti Mataji also to come on one time. Yeah. And certainly we really appreciate all the contributions that's coming through your team. It really means a lot. Right now, the situation is pretty dire and everything counts. Every penny counts, every dime counts. So your contribution is going a long way. So really want you to all to know that we really, really appreciating your efforts so much. Thank you all so much.
Thank
and
you.
then I'll arrange some more programs, some more devotees for you. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, that'd be super. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Really appreciate your efforts. Huh? So
Hare
if
Krishna.
devotees, Hare Krishna. So if devotees have time, let's do one round together.